A Fox News host brought a White House economic advisor onto her show, something she probably ended up regretting after he dismantled Fox News' lies live on air. Let's discuss the economy, as is the case with every election, the economic conditions, and importantly, the perceived economic conditions will play a huge role in the eventual outcome in 2024. And because of that fact, unfortunately, there are countless entities dedicated to pumping out propaganda 24/7 that seeks to convince Americans that Biden has destroyed the economy and it's all been horrible because of him. One of those entities is, of course, Fox News. And I have a great clip from Fox News where White House Council of Economic Advisors Chair Bernstein shows up and just obliterates a bunch of these right-wing talking points. Before playing that clip, though, I need to give my normal disclaimer that I often give when we talk about the economy. None of what we're about to go through is an attempt to invalidate your experience within the economy. People have real economic pain, and that's serious, and it needs to be addressed. The argument being made is using the traditional metrics that we use to judge economies. The current American economy is actually really strong. And super importantly, when you're honest and assess which economic conditions Biden had the power to impact, what he did, and then what the outcome was, you realize he's handled the recovery from the pandemic-caused economic downturn really well. And the fact that just under 3 years since he got into office, we are where we are after all of the massive problems he inherited is stunning. And the fact that even the painful economic realities like inflation have been worse in comparable economies that didn't have Biden as the president, such as all of the other G7 countries, shows clearly he's not the cause of that problem. And I would love for someone on Fox News to explain how it is that the United States, when you set us next to these other comparable economies in the world, had the best, most effective recovery after the pandemic. I'll say more on that after watching this.
I know you're going to want to paint a rosy picture, but for most people, their experience is not good.
Well, I want to try to paint a realistic picture that's nuanced, that takes into account everything you just said, but also reflects not just what people are saying, which we have to listen to. They are the best arbiters of their economic conditions, but also what they're doing. So we're just coming out of a Black Friday that is already setting records for online buying, between 10 and 16 billion for Black Friday online. We are looking at consumer spending that's been driving this economy forward, posting growth rates that are north of 5%. We have an unemployment rate that's been below 4% for 21 months. Now, what that means in a period where inflation has come down by 2/3, it peaked at 9%, it's now 3.2%.
And wages have not kept up.
So real wages have grown. Real wages, in other words, wages are beating prices now. So is disposable income, by the way.
But for most of that time, they have not.
Correct. So I'm talking about the last 4 or 5 months. If you actually ask somebody like that, and I think you should, because it's important to flesh this out, what do they think of the fact that we've capped insulin prices at $35 a month? What about giving Medicare the power to negotiate lower drug prices? What about tax incentives for manufacturing jobs? What about capping out-of-pocket prescription drug costs? All of those are in play. They are legislated, Shannon. They are in the field. And I don't think some of the folks that we're talking to here know enough about that. President Biden likes to say, don't compare me to the almighty, compare me to the alternative. So I just took you through 5 minutes of everything we're doing to try to help precisely that person and everybody like her, whether it's raising real wages, keeping the job market tight, bringing down inflation, lowering costs of gas, of groceries. What do we hear from the other side? Tax cuts for rich people, giveaways to big pharma, helping wealthy tax cheats evade taxes to the tune of hundreds of billions of dollars. That's who they're fighting for. She is who we're fighting for, and we're going to keep doing it until we reach her.
It's so good. And you could tell that the Fox News host was uncomfortable having to listen to his factual statements. And continuing on what I was saying before, it's not that there isn't real pain. There absolutely is. It's that things are much better now than they would have been otherwise because Biden and Democrats are in power. As Bernstein pointed out, if Republicans got their way, the only people being helped after the devastating economic situation caused by the pandemic would have been those who already have plenty. An example of this they've recently been fighting to partially defund the IRS, which would inhibit Biden's policy that seeks to go after wealthy tax cheats. That's the Republican priority. And actually, I'll weave into this story some clips from a speech Biden gave today before looking at some of what he had to say. Here's Pete Buttigieg reflecting on the situation he took over as transportation secretary when Biden's term began.
When President Biden first took office, the pandemic had led to the most profound and widespread set of disruptions to our transportation systems since 9/11, including enormous strain on our supply chains. We were paying more, we were waiting longer. We had about 100 ships bearing down on those West Coast ports, and some in the media, just about exactly 2 years ago, were saying that Christmas was going to be canceled. Christmas, of course, was not canceled. All through the year, President Biden had been challenging us to stay ahead of this issue and to be prepared to respond. And so, as tough as that season was, we wound up having an all-time record high of goods moving through America's ports, and people received their packages from major shippers with about a 99% on-time rate.
And I'll remind you, again, that Biden took over a situation where necessary recovery efforts under Trump and him, plus supply chain issues caused by the pandemic and corporate greed, were driving up inflation. Unemployment was high, businesses had permanently closed, Trump was failing on an effective vaccine rollout to end the pandemic. So don't let people ignore all those factors when analyzing the economic performance under Joe Biden. We were in a crisis, and he took over that, had to figure out within the context of those variables what could he do, and almost immediately got past the American Rescue Plan that did help to get the economy back on track. And then over the following years implemented all the policies that I've gone through so many times in the last few days. And so, yes, it's factual and fair to accurately assess that reality, see how quickly we got back to a really strong economy, and say, well, surely Biden should get some credit. Biden and Democrats, that is. And it does drive me crazy, as I've said before, because so many people say, oh, it's not fair for Biden to point out, as he's been doing, that Trump is one of only two presidents to have left office with fewer jobs than when he came into office. And the reason cited as to why that's unfair is because the pandemic happened while Trump was president, and you can't blame him for that, would be the argument. Now, even if I grant you that, and we ignore Trump's horrific mishandling of the pandemic, and if I set aside the fact that Republicans would never do that for Democrats, you just know it, let's do it anyways. Even so, that then proves that you're being dishonest. If you're going to, as we should, take into consideration the way that the pandemic impacted Trump's awful economic record, then we must take into consideration how it may have impacted Biden's economic record, which even with those facts, we see a strong economy right now. So what does that say about Biden's handling of the economy? And I know I've gone through so much of this so many times, but especially in my personal life, I hear people so often with just a deep misunderstanding about what Biden's economic record is. And it drives me crazy just because facts matter, and also because I know how that's going to impact people and their voting decisions in 2024. Then here's Biden today discussing where things stood as Americans sat down for Thanksgiving.
Well, this past week, as Americans gathered around their own kitchen tables for Thanksgiving dinner, that was our goal, to give them a little more breathing room. And together, we made progress. You know, from turkey to air travel to tank of gas, costs went down. They went down. Now, to people making a lot of money, that doesn't matter a whole lot because the costs are relatively small compared to wealthy incomes. In fact, as a share of earnings this Thanksgiving, dinner was the fourth cheapest ever on record. I want you all to know that. I look at all the press, look at that. The press is particularly excited about that, I can see.
And the comment at the end there about the press is actually pretty important, because the press often struggles to properly report on the successes of the Biden administration, not just the economic recovery that was, as I said, better and faster than other comparable economies, but also his legislative record, the list of which I've walked through a bunch of times lately. It often seems like it's only the negative economic and legislative stories that get any time in the media. And you just got to admit that's heavily contributing. It has to be to Americans' perception of Biden's handling of the economy. Then you have this moment as well from Biden.
The plan would also cut Medicare while providing more tax giveaways to the wealthy and the biggest corporations. And my predecessors, once again, God love him, call for cuts that could rip away health insurance for tens of millions of Americans in Medicaid. They just don't give up. But guess what? We won't let these things happen.
So there he's again pointing out the awful alternative to him being Trump. Now, by the way, Trump is still promising to this day to, if he gets into office again, repeal Obamacare and replace it with something much better. Midas Touch reports. In a rerun of his 2016 presidential campaign, MAGA leader Donald Trump promised this week that he would terminate the Affordable Care Act, also known as Obamacare, and provide an alternative. In July of 2020, Midas Touch points out, Trump said he would be signing a healthcare plan in 2 weeks. His spokesperson, Kayleigh McEnany, even handed Leslie Stahl of 60 Minutes a giant book that she claimed was the Trump healthcare plan. There was no healthcare plan in the book. Now Trump is back at it again, despite the fact that the ACA has been law of the land for a decade and millions use it to get access to affordable health care insurance. Trump is once again promising to terminate the ACA and rip healthcare away from American citizens with no plan to replace it, although Trump says he is seriously looking at alternatives. And then it references a Truth Social post from Trump where he's making this point. So as I will continue to point out, you can elect someone who actually intends on serious governance and has accomplishments to show for it, or someone who will make empty promises. And gosh, what was that other notable part about Trump? Oh yeah, destroy American democracy. Also, just super quickly, Midas Touch, doing incredible work, by the way, also pointed this out. The S&P 500 stock market index saw gains of 8.7% in November, one of the best monthly performances in a century. The S&P has gained more than 8% in a single month, only 10 times since 1928. The index is up almost 19% in 2023. Some market analysts are predicting that the S&P 500 will top 5,000 in 2024, setting new record highs heading into the 2024 election. Incredible. And by the way, all of this comes as Biden is successfully negotiating hostage releases, apparently playing a central role in that. So yeah, it seems like his age isn't getting in the way of much, I gotta say. And the last thing I'll show you on that, here was his perfect response to getting asked if he's too old to run for re-election.
Mr. President, are you too old to be running for re-election?
Stupid. You just gotta love it. He responded, if you didn't hear, podcast listeners, that's stupid. Now, by the way, the Fox News reporter did a report on this. Fox News aired a report on what you just watched, where it said Biden's facing questions about his age. Even in Nantucket, someone asked him about that, and then played the clip we just watched, without disclosing that it was the Fox News reporter who asked the question. It's a little strange to report on the questions being asked to the president as if it's notable that someone's even asking that question. Look, someone asked this question to the president, not mentioning you're the one who asked it. Anyways, as I'll always say, it's perfectly fine to be concerned, if you are, about his age or whatever else you'd like when it comes to Biden's re-election bid. I'm just getting increasingly really annoyed that so many people spend so much time focusing on that and not enough time focusing on the authoritarian on the other side of this election and the fact that so much is at stake in this election. And also, I have to tell you, yes, I will proudly admit I'm pretty dang excited to vote for more common sense policies, the infrastructure law, American Rescue Plan, the PACT Act, Chips and Science Act, Inflation Reduction Act, things like that. I'm pumped to vote for that again. And the management of world crises, the adult governance in 2024, especially considering the alternative. Before you go, don't forget to become a member at lukebeasleyshow.com/membership to get access to the daily bonus show, an entire bonus show Monday through Friday, plus you're supporting what we're doing here. Plus follow me on Threads at Luke Beasley Official, Instagram at Luke Beasley Official, X at Luke P. Beasley, and sign up for the Beasley Brief, a daily morning newsletter that summarizes the previous day's events by going to lukebeasleyshow.com/brief, and I'll talk to you all next time.